Welcome, everyone. This is our, believe it or not, 52nd episode of Let's Do Lunch, the show where we talk about the business of entertainment, gaming, music, rights tech, and everything in those fields. Today's show is our, Wednesdays are always our Business of Game show. And being that it is Pride Month, we have our show today focused on diversity and inclusion in gaming. We have two terrific guests on the show today. Nika is executive of the IGDA Foundation, and Gordon Bellamy, good friend and colleague, we've known him for a long time, is CEO of the Gay Gaming Professionals Group. He's also a visiting scholar at USC Games and Esports. One comment before I bring them on the show here is, please, folks, introduce yourself in the chat. It's really easy to do. Just click on the chat button. Make sure to use the drop down that says all attendees and panelists so that everyone can see your introduction. And then put your questions in the Q&A. The show runs approximately 45 minutes. And let's bring on Gordon and Nika. Welcome, guys.
Wow, thank you for having us, Ned, and great to see everyone out there in the crowd. For everyone who's not super webinar familiar, we can see you, so I can say hi, Tamo, hi, Christina, hi, Eric, and of course, welcome, Nika. Let's start with the introductions. Let's go a little deeper into, maybe take us on your journey, Nika, that took you here, and then tell us a little bit about the IGDA Foundation.
Hi, nice to meet everyone. It's so exciting to get to continue to do these things virtually. My name is Nika Nour. I'm the Executive Director of the IGDA Foundation. We focus exclusively on diversity and inclusion issues and creating solutions that are sustainable in really making sure that our workforce is dynamic and supportive and continues to hire and retain talent from women to people of color, LGBTQ, and other areas. Our flagship program is that we bring together folks from all around the world and different countries and put them through a series of boot camps and ensure that they have some sort of job security or really well-established placement in the games industry.
That's amazing. How did you find your way into this space, into the game space?
Oh my gosh, Gordon.
Yeah, origin story. We're gonna do origin stories. We're just gonna go in.
Yeah, I do not have I don't know if anyone has a standard entry to game story. Mine was definitely unusual. I used to be a Capitol Hill staffer who understood internet, which, believe it or not, Congress did not understand the internet in 2008, and made my foray into the Internet Association supporting communications policy on net neutrality and patent reform. When Gamergate hit, the Obama administration sought out a lot of different professionals in the space, and that's actually how I got my foray into games. I was known for being adept and somewhat competent at tech policy, which is a very low bar for 2013, and just really, really cared about all that was going on and just absolutely loved games. So from there, I was hired into the games industry to support government affairs at the Entertainment Software Association, home of E3, the beloved trade show. And since then, I left to basically pursue a PhD in informatics and really, just roll up my sleeves, because I learned that diversity and inclusion in the games is definitely a much more complicated problem set than almost anywhere else or any other part of the tech sector.
Wow, that's super interesting. So obviously we're unified by Constance Steinkuhler, for those of you at home,
right.
A leader in our educational craft forever. What do you focus on in informatics? I'm actually super curious. Take us into that. For those at home who don't have a degree in informatics.
Right, informatics basically the study of machine learning and people. So currently I am focused on crafting experiments to test human cognition and recognition against deepfake video technology, and whether or not we can reason through deepfake videos, or if they actually alter our values and belief system, as we see the prevalence of misinformation continue online.
Wow, that sounds like rich, deep, challenging work. Wow. Okay, so you may save us all. So those who don't know me, our missions are very aligned. I know our mission is around education and employment and expertise in entrepreneurship. And that aligns very strongly with what your foundation is doing. Maybe talk about some of the challenges of, I guess, especially now, right? There's a lot of, there's social unrest, right? We're all experiencing. There's a pandemic that we're all sharing around the world, around the focus around professional development that's yours. Like, how are you keeping our industry focused on professional development when there are clearly at least two other fronts which have jumped to the fore?
Look, even on a good day, running a nonprofit is very, very difficult. It requires a community, it requires efforts. You have people walking through your doors, whether they're aspiring and looking for a way into the industry or because something not great happened to them, because they had a not so pleasant experience that really boils down to gender harassment or discrimination of some kind.
Yes.
So it is already a very, it is already a gig that requires a type of mental bandwidth that is really, really just, you know, it's just something that you absorb. But doing this now in a pandemic, whole new host of issues. Just, it is, I'm, you know, I don't even mean to laugh, but we now have we already have underrepresented communities that had serious obstacles facing them when trying to enter the industry or try to find new career paths, and throw on top of that a pandemic and limited networking opportunities or mentorship opportunities or scholarship opportunities. Life just got a lot harder. For us, we usually run our annual stuff to kick off all sorts of programming, professional development at GDC, as you know, because GDC is essentially the hub of a lot of inspiration, international companies coming in. And I don't know why, but personally, I went full Mad Max and I was like, we don't know what 2021 is going to bring us. We're not going to have your careers be on hold. And we pivoted to online very, very quickly. We've now spent the last 3 months literally shaping, creating a program, redoing everything we have ever done for the past few years into a virtual space, because I don't believe that geographic diversity should be a reason why you don't find your way forward or a path into this space. We love GDC, but it's not the end all be all for people.
Sure. We made a similar pivot. And as you talk about geographic diversity, I think there's also now a new socioeconomic diversity around internet, like just even having high-speed internet. Everyone here in this room can get into the Zoom and be a part of the conversation. You can imagine how quickly you are displaced now, right? If you don't have the possibility of working from home, forget working from home, interviewing from home. For a role, if you don't have those resources now in your home, and especially for students and emerging people where there are no more computer labs, there are no more, additive university resources, you are literally, not even in a pun, left to your own devices, right? To try and thrive and compete. I know we're navigating that now. We have a scholars program that we do in partnership with ESA Foundation, all things tied together, and we're super focused on how do we galvanize our community online to support them, both not only financially support them, but with resources, scholarship, mentorship, all digital. People here obviously want to know what they can do at home, right? They wanted to engage and sort of take actions. What do you think are sort of the first steps post, people are getting a lot of awareness, right? The discussion of being non-racist versus anti-racist, but now people want to just do things. Let's just assume everyone's super anti-racist. Great, that's awesome. Now, what do they do, right, to engage with, I guess I'll call them the 3 T's, time, talent, and treasure, to move things forward, specifically in the game space? What can people be doing?
Well, and Gordon, I'm curious about how you'll respond to, or what your thoughts are on this line of inquiry, this line of thinking. It's on the foundation front. We have been making calls to action looking for support since January, February, years before.
Yes.
And it's awesome that everybody wants to help. This is fantastic. For me, I'm like, the starting point is if you are currently in a company that has made some sort of statement or commitment, make sure that your company is ingraining that into their 3-year budget moving forward.
Sure.
Make sure that you're actually developing a CSR plan. Make sure that you are voicing or raising awareness that this isn't an additive thing to dump on the person of color or woman in your office to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about your jam, Gordon, but like when I grew up, like being a diversity and inclusion officer was not on like the list of professions I ever thought I'd be doing. Because it's not something that I dreamed of. It's just something that for years and years was kind of assigned as almost like a throwaway piece of labor, but important to a company's bottom line. And I think that's okay that we recognize that, but there's that intention, right? So if you're in a company and comfortable with any sort of authority or leadership or ability to safely voice it, like definitely start looking inwards of where you work, because that's where the resources are. And at least that's my point of view from that aspect. What I worry about, and of course, like I'm always worrying, right? What I'm worried about is everyone right now is super ambitious, very willing, and however you engage in, diversity and inclusion, especially with what's going on, just please keep doing it 6 months from now, 6 weeks from now, 6 years from now.
Well, it's funny you think of it that way. So, and I can talk a little about what we're doing in our experience right now, because we're doing a Pride event this weekend.
Right.
Right. And I'll do my weird flex bro. Here, watch, I'll just paste in the chat because people go, what is it? I go, bam. Let's see if this works. Bam, that's what it is. Right? And so companies are coming to the floor. It's very exciting event. I think that free ourselves of the nomenclature of diversity and inclusion. If you think about anyone that you consider a person, okay, just consider that people are human for the time being, and the resources as a business that you devote to them sort into 3 real hats for me, okay? And those 3 hats are affinity, like I'm glad you exist, so let me do something because I'm affinity. There's employment, like I want you to be employed and I want to retain and recruit you. And then there's business, and I mean business in the sense that we have a business, we do X, we will make more X via servicing this person, right? And I think you'll find that companies, right, will execute against programs in those 3 buckets. And what you're describing, right, is the need. So affinity, it's very easy to be seasonal with affinity. Like I'll celebrate Ireland on St. Patrick's Day. I have an affinity for it. That's really nice. I'll wear green, right? And that's positive. That's a great thing. That doesn't mean it's my business. It just means I have an affinity for it, right? Now, employment, I go, oh, what are things I can do to recruit and retain people, right? Am I giving people chances to talk? Am I exploring different colleges, universities? Am I having professional development programs, webinars, those sorts of resources, such that my place is a competitively great place for whomever I consider to be human to work, okay? Then there's a business concern, which is, you know what? We sell rocks. I want to sell more rocks, and I want it to cost less to make the rocks that I'm going to sell, okay? And am I going to devote resources, year-round resources, to doing that, right? To being around, to my bottom line. And the sorts of year-round your investments you're talking about can take any of those 3 shapes, but often they'll fall in different departments that have very different budgets and resources to attack these challenges. And I can imagine, and maybe if you want to talk about examples or not, where you can talk to different companies who do the same thing, but the discussion you're having is one about affinity, like it's really great, right? Oh, employment, like, oh, this helps engage with my employees. This is going to be great. I like this. Or, oh, this is our business.
Right.
You're important to our business. we want to support you. You're in all the PowerPoint decks because you're our business.
Yeah.
Maybe sort of talk about that and maybe how that has changed, how the pandemic has affected that, how social unrest has affected those sorts of discussions.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think in the pandemic, you can't really use that as a compass or even a benchmark, right? Because people just didn't know what was going on next. We had different rules, different state lines. We have, we're an international nonprofit, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm literally sitting and planning, like, can I even support our current our standard programs next year? Maybe not, because one of my program directors, her home country said she's not allowed to travel to the US.
Sure.
So everyone's constantly recalibrating. I think everybody, in terms of like pandemic giving or support, they do. I'm going to give everybody a break there. Not that like I get to decide, right? But people are still trying to juggle, like, how do I feed my kids, get into this Zoom call, and like, crap, how do I take this dog out for a walk? Can I take this dog out for a walk? I forgot my mask. Did I not forget my mask? Am I wearing it right? So there's all of those questions. And I think especially in that first few months, people just didn't know what to do. And now there is this focus of like, okay, this is just not okay. It's almost kind of heartening to watch people resist getting haircuts and going to bars and whatever. But we could not resist, doing the right thing, which is coming together and talking about this important issue and moving away from like everything else that's been going on. And I think that's really heartening that people have really come together in that way. And I think the question is, what's next? And I don't know about like your thoughts, but like I am so intense about the long-term planning of what's next,
Sure.
not the short-term solutions. And I will browbeat that till the end of the year next year. I'm moving forward.
Well, sure. And I think part of the challenge that we share is identifying that we're trying to solve the same problem. Right? Because I think we'll talk about social unrest that's going on right now, right? Around there's racial inequity, which would be a euphemism for what's actually going on. There is the difference between a discussion of racial inequity is bad. It's bad, right? And so I don't have an affinity for it. We should devote resources to that.
Right.
Which is different than maybe a second stage, which is racial inequity in my employment base is bad. Right. And how do I change and evolve my recruiting practices or employee retention practices to keep people there? And racial inequity is bad for my business. Like we're actually in the business of this, and a change in this would be a positive change for my business. Here's the chart. And I feel as though there's been some very important steps being made in the first category. Like people at least observe, like it's bad. We should do something. We should use money, time, thought. I know companies now are having like a day of reflection and learning this Friday. They're acknowledging, no, it's great. Like there is a recognition that there is something in the world which we ought to learn about, learn more. Which is different though than saying like our company needs to be a different company of people like a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now. And it's very different than like our business will grow. Or be a better business. Growth isn't always the only metric, right? That we might be a more whole business if we were addressing, inequity both in our workplace and all around the world.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean that like you need to change the people in your company, right? Just add to it. Like you can. There's nothing wrong with a diversity of perspectives, Gordon. Only 2% of my arms are up now. I've got the Persian hands, they're claws, they're here, right? But only 2% of gaming professionals are Black. The percentage of Hispanic, even like more stark in contrast. I just think we could do better than 2%.
Okay. So I mean, we'll dive into that because speaking on behalf of the entire 2%, I'll say that that the discussion you're having is a very important one, which is changing the percentage versus growing the opportunities are two different questions. When you are asking someone who may in fact be in the 98%, right? One is in fact like, I want to change it. I wish this number was 10. But like, but we're not hiring any more people. What do you mean, right? That's a different question than, oh, your business would be better and have room for growth if you discovered more people and they were additive to what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, right, with our rock business, it's going to be additive to the cost, and then it needs to be additive to the number of rocks, right? And people always ask, you know, they ask for the business case for diversity, right? And a big part of that is around like, how does this grow my business versus just sort of changing the face of my business?
Right.
It's which would be a difficult discussion to have. We actually have a question in the crowd from Mark Patterson. Oh yeah, this is in service to y'all. Like we talk all day. This is for y'all. Mark Patterson asked, well, I'll field this one because he says the GGP Scholars Program Initiative is outstanding. Thank you. How do you go about, so people at home, we have a scholarship program in part of the ESA Foundation. It's for students of all walks and orientations, races. They are financially challenged, but they're people who do the community service in the LGBTQ community. So it doesn't matter whether you yourself are queer, you might be inspired by Will and Grace or your mother or your sister or your neighbor. If you're the one doing the work, the scholarship is for you. So just to set that baseline.
Awesome.
And we have two who are at USC, one at University of Texas and one at NYU. How do we go about ensuring long-term support for the program beyond momentary emotional motivation, driving brand celebrity engagement? That's any ideas from the audience that, well, I'll tell you what I think about, and then of course, I'd love to hear from the audience because we live this. I think the number one thing for us, and I describe it in this sort of this T-shape, comes in specificity. Like the first thing you have to acknowledge is that these people are people of value innately. So if you don't think they're of value, well then you'll be like, oh, this is a charity, and it's, you know, once I've paid the charity, I'll move on from the bucket and move on. So that's the number one thing for us. Like Nika was identifying, that these people will help you grow your business so that there is room for growth, like inside your organization. I think the second thing we do is by providing ways to engage year-round. I think everyone who's in a marginalized community, like you don't get to pick the month, like you don't get to pick that June is LGBT, like you don't pick for Black February, right? We're here all year round. So how do you provide opportunities so people even have the choice to engage like in a meaningful way year round? And I sort of take that on us to be like, the question you should ask us is like, what are you doing in July? What are you doing in August, right? Because you're saying it's not an affinity play. You're saying it's either an employment or a business discussion. Well, okay, I can understand that. What does that discussion look like? How are you a bridge, right? And not a wall. I think a lot of managers will be like, bring me solutions, not problems. We believe you there's a problem. If you just show me your problem deck, that doesn't help any of us. That's just more work for me, and I want to go home and watch Scandal. Like bring me the solution deck, and then I can either approve it or not approve it, or iterate it with it on you. So that's why I think, obviously, all ideas from the audience, really welcome. Referring to, okay, so let me follow up here. Questions, a few important steps that game-focused academic institutions, hey Sonia, thank you, by the way, can take to improve diversity, inclusion at all levels as rapidly and as effectively as possible. I have strong feelings.
Do you?
I do.
I don't know if mine are as strong, so I'm happy to start
that one.
Start this one.
Yeah, start from Sonia Michaels, please.
So obviously, a few important steps that game-focused academics. Yeah, academic institutions are funny. It also depends on at what level are you bringing in students and faculty. There's a difference between recruiting undergraduate and PhDs versus associate producers and actual faculty. I think, and Gordon, right now, even academic institutions, like it is hard. Everyone's, I wanna say the fastest way is hire diverse faculty, but there's hiring freezes all around the country. I don't know about what your conversations are like, but mine are like, we wanna hire faculty, but a year from now.
I think it begins, so
Right?
for me, right, I grew up in the last millennium, And so for me, very basic things. It begins with the bias, right? And so everyone who is unique, there's questions you have to navigate before you begin to talk. And so for me in my head, I remember when I was a kid, like I remember it used to be black is beautiful, right? I remember I'm black and I'm proud, James Brown was amazing. Right now, we're at Black Lives Matter. Super reductive, right? And so part of improving diversity and inclusion is valuing it as a positive trait. If it truly in your heart is not a positive trait, if it truly in your heart is a deficit to be a female, to be neurodiverse, to be a person of color, to be differently able, if you truly think that that is a negative, and that can be your truth, right? Everyone has biases. Well, then it is going to be a lot more arduous to improve diversity and inclusion because it actually goes against your own innate stream, right? Like you're sort of saying like, ooh, I hope this gets better, but I'm actually innately betting against the odds, right? And what it means truly is that because this is true, it's possibly to have too many of them. Okay, so if you do not believe that being a woman is a positive trait, well, then it's possible to have too many, right? And if it's possible to have too many, well, now you've begun the negotiation, okay, of how many is too many. Okay, well, let's definitely not have that many and start working backwards. And that is what every person of whatever that type of person is navigating before you ask them questions about your qualifications.
Right. And I mean, I think, Gordon, that perspective is so important. I think at least one of the, like, if we're looking at rapidly and effectively, then you start with the undergraduate level, because the barrier to entry there is make sure that you are almost, like nicely advertising to high schools, to components, enriching communities, making sure that they know that your program exists. Like we still forget that video games are still a stigma for, even like joining those degrees or those, it's changed, but when I grew up, right, like playing video games was not acceptable. I would walk my neighbor's dog and pocket cash secretly, got on a bus to Best Buy, purchased a DS and kept it in my pillow covers at night. I never in my wildest dreams did I ever consider that you could even get a degree in this. So part of it is just educating parents, and then also looking at your local high schools. Right now you see a whole uptick in esports and video game clubs, and I've been having conversations with various foundations and nonprofits in the space. There's still predominantly young white men in those clubs. And it's systemic. You need to start as early as possible in enriching what diversity means in these communities, and then how you actually ingratiate them.
Yeah, and also I think on how you define, I guess, culture fit, right? So, so a lot of culture fit historically comes to pedigree, right? So, for example, I attended St. Paul's School. If you're from New England prep school community, you know what I'm talking about, right? And you're at UCI studying informatics. I went to Harvard. ... We list our resumes, all the companies we work at. And that sort of pedigree is systemic. It doesn't actually speak to our work ethic or to the traits that will enable us to be successful in an academic setting or in a work setting, but it's sort of a way of coding that we speak your language, and that will, if people were able to continue to reimagine their sense of what is pedigree, right? Like, and this goes all the way across society, from dating to employment to everything, right? Where people will say the term is just a preference. Like, I just don't prefer, right? Well, that also happens in the workplace, where people be like, oh, it's not that I don't like you, it's just a preference, right? And those preferences, right, can define the opportunities which are available to folks.
Absolutely.
Wait, who's this? It says Chris. Okay, Chris. It says Chris. It's very short on my screen, but we're going to ask this. Referring back to the 2%, what are your thoughts on how to grow? Oh, and there's a Q&A section. We'll do both. Okay, we'll jump over to Q&A also. What are your thoughts on how to grow that number? Is representation at the top needed to increase employees in the larger workforce? Okay, so I'll answer this, and I wish I could see your name full, Kurt, but I'll assume it is
Christina.
Oh, definitely. Well, we have 3 Christinas, so we'll give credit to all the Christinas. Of course, I think a question across government, across employment, across family is this: when you are not in the room, who speaks for you? Okay, and so I can sort of say, as a Black person, as a gay person, there's not always a Black or gay person, as they say in Hamilton, in the room where it happens, right? And so the question begins with like, who speaks for you? And obviously, and I think everyone will accept this to be true, that like someone who shares your culture fit, right? And that could be because they identify as you identify, so they have a similar narrative journey, right? Or because of their nature, who they are, if they identify as with you as a fully fledged person, right? And not as an other, well, then they're in a better position to speak for you, right? And in a better position to value your representation, right? Whatever that means, whether it be across, you know, your external traits, right? Extrinsic traits or your intrinsic traits in the workplace. So yes, like having more people in decision-making positions who share your values will make more of you inside those companies. Okay, let's check over Q&A here. One second. Is the goal ultimately to present to executives how profitable is to diversify their bold? Is the goal ultimately? No. Okay, this is Tamo. Sorry, before we go this, Tamo, no, the goal is for you to own the company. That's the goal.
What are we looking at?
That was the last. Tamo asks, is the ultimate goal to present to executives how profitable it is for them to diversify? No. Tamo, you're going to be executive. You're going to be the they. My goal is to present to you someday. That's my dream. And I'll be in a meeting with you, and I'll be living my best life. I'll be like, I'm arrived. I'm in a meeting with Tamo, and I'll be talking to your admin, and they'll be trying to push it. And I'm like, do not push this meeting. That's my dream.
I mean,
okay.
I think they bring up a good point, right? Like we do talk about how do you present diversity to a company. You've hit on it in so many different ways, and it's tough because you just do have some companies that are like, how's my bottom line looking? You have some companies that are, their CEOs are like, what does my culture look like a year from now? But I do think something that we forget is gamers, and let's call it, you know, and consumers, regardless of games, but just in all entertainment, people want to know where they're buying products from. People want to employ products and platforms in their life that don't treat people like crap. Right? People are starting to care now. They're doing more investigative work. They want facts. It's never going to be perfect, but, and again, like, is it antithetical to being valued as a person? Absolutely. That's also kind of the world we live in today, is how we value labor and what kind of labor, you know, has the dollar signs behind it. At the end of the day, I mean, I don't know about you, Gordon, but, you know, the IGDA Foundation will relentlessly focus on making sure that not only when we find amazing, fantastic, diverse talent, and for us, it's 3 programs. We look at students around the globe. We look for women and non-binary looking for their first job or had a crap experience and are thinking about giving it a second shot. Yeah. And then next gen leaders, people that are 3 to 7 years mid-career who need guidance. And for us, I am just very hamstrung on making sure that our individuals get hired by non-shitty bosses and have awesome work environments where they can grow and be and create and achieve. And I feel like that is generally, that should be a very low bar for the games industry, which is the most enjoyable creative product and platform, entering open worlds and solving puzzles and battling bad guys and being an ogre or getting a cool sword or having some magic power or replaying Kingdom Hearts just because you feel like it. Like, our industry and working in our industry should be as fun and enjoyable and exhilarating as like the experience of play.
Yeah.
Maybe that's too aspirational.
No, it's great. No, it's fantastic. I want to actually go to Ginger's question because I think it relates in a powerful way. So Ginger's question is, to what extent do you think gaming platforms should crack down on sexist content in games, in particular on the more subtle, that's in quotes because it's not subtle, right, content? For example, the sexualization of feminine characters that historically has been widely accepted in the industry. Following up, how do you think those gaming platforms should address this and or enforce on those games? So first, I have a quick thought is this,
Please.
which is we're here and we're talking about diversity and inclusion. I think, and this goes back to Tamo's question too. When you say diversity, and when you even hear the word, and this is something that you need to, if you spend enough time with enough people, it became really clear to me. Sometimes when you say it, diversity, and I might say to you, Nika, you actually mean us. You're like, how do we get more of us doing this, that, and the other? Because I actually wake up and my street sign says diversity and inclusion, right? Like that's where I wake up. But to some people, when you say diversity, you actually mean them. And they go, oh, how are we gonna get more of them in positions, right? And the reason I raise Ginger's powerful question is because Ginger, the real change to me is until the platforms are drawing us, so to speak, and they're in a room and there's, if for example, there are executives who respect women as human beings in the room, right? Just say baseline human beings, and they go, oh, how are we drawing us? Or should we sexualize us? Historically, we've done this. What are we doing for us going forward? That's a very different question than how are we going to sexualize them or not sexualize them, and how does that affect our business? And if you, for everyone, I think you probably, I don't know everyone's life, I know my life. You've been in both of those types of discussions where you realize like, whoa, they're talking about, for example, in your case, feminine characters as them, and how should we draw them? What's the right amount of sexualization of them versus sitting around with a community of people where you go, wait, what's the sexualization of us that we feel comfortable as a product that we are going to sell and we're going to make money from, right? And I think that is at the heart of the discourse. Like, as long as you're waiting as a them, then you're going to get what you get, right? And that is true in any situation. I say, once again, from your family to your church to your business to your school, right? The road to empowerment, right, is to be in the room where it happens. And then you're asking the same question, but you have to acknowledge your own value in humanity. It's a very different question. Okay, simpler question would be, should I step on that ant? And I don't like stepping on ants, but some people love smashing ants, right? But that's because they're not an ant. Okay, if you're one of the ants, it's a very different question. Same thing. All right, onward.
But Gordon, right? And some of that is like, even if you're in the room or you're getting your insight, right? How many times, fine, let's go back to us for a minute.
Sure.
Or how about we, a royal we? How many times have we been pulled into a room being asked about our opinion of something because of what we look like, regardless of like, whether or not we like speak for an entire race or species or whatever. And this is the thing is like, even when you're in the room, let's say having a creative discussion, if you don't have, let's say if one of us doesn't have the authority to make impact, right? Like how often are we used for like, oh, well, I talked to Nika, or oh, like I showed it to Gordon, and they just do what they want to do anyway, right? Or how many of us, I'm sorry, Jay, but how many of us are empowered to say anything without fearing repercussions later in the lunchroom or the water cooler or whatever, because they took our opinion personally and they didn't want the opinion of a, let's say, diverse person, right? Women make up like so much of the world and we're still like a diversity hire. It's amazing.
Okay, Nika, I'm gonna get super meta with you. You're in a diversity inclusion panel right now.
I know.
You are living it. You are honey, you're soaking in it. Okay. And so what we do with this access, right, is up to us. Like one of the challenges of exceptionalism, right, is this. So when we get a platform like the one we're in right now, okay, we can go, we made it. Like, holla, check out my background. Your background's fly. You're executive director, me too, right? Check my wiki, right? We can do that. Or we can use these platforms and opportunities, right, to truly feel a part of the digital entertainment world community, right? And lift up people and share information, right? And in fact, this is one of the rare times where it's just us talking. I mean, unless Ned comes in and like cuts the mic, like we can say what we want right now. And
there's apparently 50 people here.
Yeah, right? Right? Well,
Right.
and that's scale and that's reach, right? And those people often are going into exceptional situations, right?
Right.
Where they are being forced to represent themselves as marginalized and go like, as the other, right? Will you do this? This is happening right now in a lot of workplaces, right? Where people are like, will you wear masks because wearing a mask will help me be more healthy, right? And I'm actually maybe even thinking of you and your family too, but it will also help me, right?
Right.
And they aren't like, oh, it's the default that everyone should be healthy, so we should all do the same thing. Like, of course, right? Because we're all valuable humans. It's a very difficult burden of bias to navigate every day, which is why it's so much important to have bosses, right, who sort of see that equity in place.
Right.
Because then it's like, well, what are we going to do for the health of the office? Or what are we going to do for the economic health of people who look, identify, are from where you're from?
Right. Well, and then, to Ginger's question on like, how do we address or enforce these in games? And Gordon, you see the world like so like awesome. I love the way you kind of explain different paths. So forgive me for being a little narrow in this one, right? But it's like, if you are an other or person of color or whatever that sees something like, hey, maybe we shouldn't, like, maybe we should, you're like, I don't know, in that game we've got, right? You have two paths almost. You have the path of being the other, right? The other who is maybe like kind of mid-career, beating down the offices, sending emails, like fighting from the inside, right? I'm fighting the good fight from the inside.
Sure.
Like, we can do this. Like, why don't we add this female character? Why don't we add that person character? Why can't we do X? Why don't we change our play, right? There's that internal banging of the box. And then there's path B, or the second path, like, I'm just gonna make my own game that's awesome. Shit, they're not gonna listen to me. I'm doing it myself. And it feels like those are like the two paths that we're constantly like, either, have job security, hopefully, awesome healthcare plan, and I'm going to fight the system from the inside and I'm going to do it and just get really tired. Or from the other side, I'm going to make this on my own. I don't need anybody else, but I got to find my funding. I got to feed my kids. And that's where I, at least with our grantees or with prospective individuals, or even like personally, right? Like, you're right, we've made it. We make decisions, we sit on these panels, we actually get to have these conversations. And if anybody hates us, like, who cares? But not everybody has that luxury. And so those are the two paths. And both of them seem systemically arduous and difficult. I always lean to like, just make your own. Just make the game you want to make. You shouldn't have to answer to what other people think or want or validation. Because every game started from somewhere, but I'm curious about.
I agree with you. I know we're going to wrap up. I wanted to first say job security is a myth unless you're in the boss. Unless you're on the whiteboard with the magic marker in your hand, then you don't have any job security. Someone else has job security. Right? But I want to go to David Watts. David Watts, do you believe that Riot Games move fast enough to fire the employee made racist? Okay. Oh, sorry. Let me read the whole question. They can't all see it. Do you believe that Riot Games move fast enough to fire its employee who made racist George Floyd posts on social media, or should have identified much earlier that the fired employee was possibly creating a toxic racist environment at Riot Games? Whew. Okay. Here's what I will say about Riot Games for real. Their head of people and their head of diversity inclusion is now the same person, Angela Roseborough. I love her. She is amazing. And I would offer that, at least for my life in the game history, this has been the most public, immediate response I've ever seen to something like this.
Right.
And so I always like to think that that all companies have challenges. All people have challenges in high resolution. This narrative journey seemed to be one of action, right? Does it represent every action ever that could be taken in a time machine? I don't know. I don't have a time machine to go backwards, but I'm saying going forwards, I think people will be more considerate of what they post, and that this is going to make that the ripple effect of this across the industry is going to be meaningful, because If a company, a major employer like this is willing to go on this narrative journey in a public way, well, that sort of breaks the seal on discourse about expectations of people sort of in and out of the office. And so we won't know, David, is what I'm saying, for about 5 to 10 years, whether or not they move fast enough. We just won't know, right? Because that's really going to be the proof in the pudding is, does this create a climate, right, that looks and feels different than today, right? And I don't know if your personal reaction was shock or fulfillment or hope, but it's always good to see if that is crossed with time, right?
Yeah.
Right? Is this crossed with time? And if you have that same positive feeling 10 years from now, then I'll go, yes, this was the great first step forward towards the feeling that you now have, the trust which has been rebuilt and other things that have happened in other companies, ... If not, right, if we've taken steps backwards for some reason, right, then I'll be like, no, this didn't work. I wish they'd done something different. We should start a committee. Let's see here, Tama, last question, I think last question, let's see here. What are your thoughts on blind recruiting versus diversity hiring? Well, okay, I'll say, Gina, this is what we talked about before. I don't want, doesn't matter, recruiting. I think it's more of a question of what you decide are the positive traits. For example, if you think me going to boarding school is a positive trait, well, that's going to color, no pun intended, who you have in your workplace, right? And so until you sort of establish who you decide is an equal human, and then what those traits are then for your jobs, that's going to be what you're hopefully not blind to. In fact, it'd be the opposite of blind recruiting. It'd be like some kind of values-based recruiting that included more people because of the values they could all share as people. Tama, which asks, what are the rates of burnout amongst marginalized? Okay, so I'm not laughing at the question. I'm laughing at the question of burnout amongst marginalized communities, because I don't know, some people, they're born burnt out. It's a different narrative journey to physical and mental and emotional distress because of the extrinsic realities that marginalized. Once you are defined as marginalized, whatever those things are things that you need to work to get to the starting line to do your work, right? So there's always going to be a continual challenge.
It is, but also to kind of like to that, I mean, and right, like what are the rates of the burn? I mean,
what does it mean? Yeah.
Right, to be right, I've always promised to be transparent. I don't fully understand that question. I think I don't understand it because I can think about it in terms of like family, right? I think about it a little bit. I interpret it as like, if you think about the burnout rate with someone trying to balance family life in a big city that has a big commute, there are definitely, like, not every workplace is structured, or not every job is really well structured for people that are trying to have families or advance. Games industry is fascinating because it asks a lot of people. It just does. And there are certain life milestones that some people may or may not want to embark on. And it makes you feel like you have something, it feels like you have something to say. Or
I go with the definition of burned out. Well, I guess burned out to me would mean like unemployable, where you've reached the point of despair or physical duress, where you no longer feel you can be employed because the physical or emotional or mental cost of doing it means that I'm not going to return to this. I have been burnt out. I can no longer have the fuel to even pursue employment, right?
Interesting.
Because I've churned out, maybe churned out would be more important than burned out. Like I feel I've churned out of the industry, whether it be I couldn't get in or my work experience was so negative that I literally will not pursue this anymore, right? And what is the rate of that? Is there like, the question might be, are there more than 2% of the people pursuing game jobs and we're not getting jobs by percentage? Or at what point in the narrative journey do we become 2%, if that makes sense? Like, is it before you started, right? Or were there a bunch of people at the door and they didn't get the job? Or is it 1 year in? And in fact, it's like tapering down to 2% after a year or 5 years, right? Like that burnout or churnout could happen at any point, especially if your metric was like how many people are of my same race, who are all having their own different journeys of stuff. So We gotta go. Ned, look, we're getting
back.
hooked. wait, hold on a sec. This is great. Diverse people. We continue this conversation. They can't stop us with these walls. What is your Twitter, Nika? See, this is how we get cut off, people. What's your Twitter? Now, Ned, we are gonna fight you right now. What's your Twitter?
I know. My Twitter is just at Nika, at Nika. I will drop the IGDA Foundation's current online grantee program and stuff right here in the chat.
Yes, drop all the links. No stopping us. No justice.
Perfect,
drop all your links.
Perfect.
We always need more support in our online programs because we have never done them online before. So this will be fun.
I've got links too. Come to Pride. Give to the program. Just drop your links. We're in the room. We're new.
Links,
Dad, I don't even feel bad for you. You asked for this. This is what happens when you get Gordon and Nika on the chat.
We have got, look, our hour is
We're not going to listen to you.
Right? I mean, it'd be awkward, right, if he pulled the plug on the diversity and inclusion thing. That wouldn't be very inclusive, Ned. Give us our minutes.
I would never pull the plug on you.
Okay.
Hey, by the way, this was a really enjoyed the conversation, guys. You guys were lively. It was a fascinating discussion. And Gordon, you've probably spoken 30 panels or so over the years with us. You've never spoken on this topic. And I just thought it was really interesting to hear your insights. And Nika, I've known you a lesser amount of time, but it was really welcome having you on the show. You guys are always welcome back on any topic you'd like to discuss.
And I want to do 30 more, Ned. I'm asking now. I'm into it. Do fam.
Okay. All right, let me make some announcements for the rest of the week. So tomorrow, folks, is our Rights Tech Forum, and we have SyncFloor on the show. Be on with our host Paul Sweeting from the Rights Tech Project. And then on Friday, we have Jonathan Ozu. If you guys were on the show a couple of weeks ago, the Mega Music Manager, Jonathan Ozu, is back. And this time he has Tom Schweizer, who is an author and diversity inclusion speaker. And they're going to be talking about the topic of understanding white privilege. It'll be an open conversation format, so people will be invited to come on the show and ask your questions. So unlike this format today, we'll actually have squares for everybody on the show. So please join us tomorrow and Friday. Have a great week, everybody.
All right, thank you everybody for making time. Hope you're having a powerful week and healthy and safe. Everyone stay healthy and safe, for God's sakes.
Absolutely.
Okay,
take care, guys. Bye.
Bye.